Hey guys, welcome to this next part of preemptive training for striking. This is the fifth part, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not asking you to smell my finger in this image here. I'm just going to show you guys what we're doing with this specific technique, the finger whip. I'm going to play the video first and then give more instruction. Okay, so that was the whole video. It's not that long, but shows you everything you need to know. So first things first, so what I'm going to use is the back of my index and middle finger. I'm going to show you specifically you're working. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit so you can see it better. So I'm going to work with this area here and this area here. I am not as much going to work with the fingertips. That's not what I want. I also don't want to have the knuckles. I just want to have, and I'll go back again, this part here. So that's a bit more or less the middle of my fingers, the back side of it. That's what I want to use to strike. There's different reasons for that. It's part of the technique because you want to use an accelerating force by doing something that is like cracking a whip. And for that, what I've noticed is that the fingertips themselves, they get sensitive in a sense that it can be quite painful. If you miss and you hit a little bit of a harder surface, you can actually mess up your fingers that way. So I wouldn't do that. So that is the first thing that I wanted to show you guys, is just that's the part that I'm going to use. Now, when you look at the movement here, it is a whipping action. So I relax my wrist, I extend my arm, and I whip the hand forward, and then my fingers come swinging around to strike at the target. So this is how I learned it. So trying to keep your fingers a little bit bent, the index and middle finger, and then using a relaxed strike from the arm, from the shoulder, sorry, extending the elbow and relaxing the wrist and just letting it come swinging around and whipping into the target, accelerating due to the movement of the arm. So it's all about this relaxed wrist action that you see me do here. And the way I learned it is that I'm going to bring it back a little bit. So I'm bending my wrist backwards so you can see it well. But what you're doing is you're going to, oh, that's a little bit too big here. So what you're going to do is raise the elbow, extend the elbow. So that means using the triceps to extend the arm. And then this is going to bring your hand forward towards the target. And just as you're going to reach the impact, you're going to rotate your wrist and let the finger swing inward. That's the technique. So it demands a lot of precision mostly and speed to be effective, not as much power. And a good setup is also another part of it. So I'm showing you for demonstration purposes, I'm standing pretty much completely sideways to the target. You don't necessarily get that position if you're in a self-defense situation, but this is easier for me to show you all the details of the technique and you'll see it better. Obviously, you could do this as well if you're in a position with your shoulders a little bit more bladed as opposed to straight at the opponent, so a little bit more like this. If you're standing fully square facing him, I wouldn't do it. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to get this to work. So some sort of bladed position or sideways position, that's where this technique works best. The advantage is that if you look at my position here, I'm standing neutral, so my legs are neutral, my arms are folded in at the elbows. This is a prayer position, which is very similar to what you see many, specifically Southeast Asian martial arts, or like in Muay Thai, when you see the practitioners greet each other by clasping both palms of the hands together, and this is a classic position. So I don't have anybody walking around like that over here where I live, so I do this adapted version where it's similar to the prayer position. My elbows are in a similar line, but my hands are just folded one on top of the other. That means that I'm not grasping them, so I don't have to relax one hand to let go of the other one before I strike. And it keeps my center line covered, so it does everything I need. So you could do it from different positions, but I like to start it from there because this is a good setup, because now I have a bent elbow to begin with. So that is the first part of the technique, is to bend the elbow and then lift it. So I have that covered already. Now I'm gonna go forward a little bit. Okay, so what I want you to watch is several things. So you see that my shoulders are square, I'm standing vertical, my arms are bent, and you've got my head here is just standing here. My legs don't really move all that much. I'm just standing in a neutral position. Now I want you to pay attention, first of all, to what's going on with my head as I do the technique. So let's take a look at that first. Okay, so there's really nothing moving. I'm at the end of the extension. My head moves a little bit forward, but there's no movement to begin in the beginning of the technique to telegraph my intent. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I want you to pay attention to, in this case, my right eye. So I'm gonna scroll back a little bit. Now I'm gonna go really slow. Just look at my right eye, and this is the start of the technique. This is the moment where I land it. And it's only now on the retraction, this is where I blink. So this is one of the things that I like to do in training, is you don't want to give anything away. And one of the tells that you can develop is blinking before you strike. So I tend to pay attention to that. Give that a try, see if that works for you. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, pay attention to the shoulders here and see what happens. So as I initiate the technique, my shoulders shouldn't move, or move as little as possible. So you can see here, I'm gonna go slowly to get to the point where it starts. Yeah, this is where it starts. So you look at my left hand. So it's starting to move, but look at my left shoulder. There's hardly any movement there. I'm not shrugging my trapezius upwards. I'm not shrugging up at that shoulder. I'm trying to hide the strike until the last possible moment. And then it goes forward and it rips around. And here, because of the thickness of the kicking shield, it's a little bit easier for me to just relax my fingers and they fold inward a little bit. That's because the target is relatively thick and hard to penetrate. So that's why you see my hand configuration as it is right now. So that's pretty much the way that you do the technique. And see me do it once again. So as little telegraphing movement as possible. There's always a little bit, but you want to minimize it. You land the technique. See, I'm pretty much in full extension here at the elbow, and my hand came whipping around at the end of the technique. And then here I pull it back to immediately get it out of range again. You can follow up, obviously, which you see me do at the end. So one more time, striking, and then coming right back again. So at this point, I'm bringing it a little bit closer with my partner, and we're going to do the application. So this is the first application I like to use, and aiming for the eye. I'm aiming for the ball of the eye. I'm trying to hit into the eye socket and not hit any bone. Now, depending on what kind of hands you have, this should be easy or a little bit more difficult. But this is the way I learned it, and I think it works quite well. The theory is that if you hit it hard enough, that because the eye is not a solid object, but it's liquid is maybe a little bit too much, but a poor comparison, but it's easier to make you understand the images. Imagine that your eye is made of jello or pudding, something like that. Again, this is not accurate anatomically speaking, but you get the idea. It's not a bone, it's not skin. It has a very different texture to it, and the way it behaves when struck is different than those other materials as well. So the way I learned it was that if you do it hard enough, then the shock wave that you send through it, because you're going so fast with the fingertips, and it's like cracking a whip, that it can do a lot of damage to the eye. Now, what I've noticed is that I've never made anybody's eye explode with that, so I cannot confirm the claim that this is what this technique does. I kind of doubt it. However, it has a really nasty effect of just overloading the nervous system, and the optical nerve gets this huge pulse through it, and it tends to make people want to curl up and stop attacking you. So that's the first part, and it's hitting it that way. I'm going to stand a little bit too close to my partner here, so I have to pull it. See, I have to pull the first one. See if I can pause it. This is pretty much the moment where I stop. So there's a relatively large distance between my hand and his eyes, because I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to injure him. And if you have somebody wearing goggles, for instance, well, it's not the same effect. It doesn't really work all that well, because you're going to injure your fingers hitting the goggles. There's not really much of protective gear that you can, correctly use. So it's best to do what I do next. And you see that I'll step back a little bit, increase the distance a little bit, so I'm sure that I don't hit him if I go fast and miscalculate the distance and go a little bit too hard. So in the next strike here, you'll see me pull it short in the sense that I'm not going as far as I could. So I'm slightly out of range. You see there's a little bit of space here at the end of my technique and between his eye. So this is by design. This is me not wanting to injure my students. You should, for the technique itself, obviously be a little bit closer, as I showed before. So that's the technique. Again, look at the hands here, shoulder position here, head. There should be as little movement as possible. You don't want to show your opponent that you're going to strike first. It needs to be coming out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you don't see anything happen. And then all of a sudden, that technique is going to lash out and strike. And you get the first shot in. So once again, coming a little bit closer, because this time I want to show the second target, and this is hitting the side of the neck. And then I like to keep the fingers a little bit more extended to get a better, a lot more of a stiffer impact, a stiffer feel throughout my hand. So it's a little bit more rigid, which means that the kinetic energy is transferred a little bit differently into the target, because I want to go deeper this time, because the neck is a different structure from the eyeball. So I need to strike with a little bit more penetration. And then I use this configuration you see here with the two fingers almost fully extended and a little bit more tension on impact, which is again something you practice. Now I can't tell you how many people I've shown this technique and they didn't believe me, and I said, look, would you like me to show it to you? And they say, yes, of course. And then either they drop to the floor or I knock them out with it. So I've come to the point where I tend to be very careful because it works quite well, but it doesn't look very efficient. Problem is, you can't do it 10 times in a row to somebody, because then they're going to end up in the hospital or worse. So you don't want that. But it works quite well. You target the arteries, the nervous system. That is a little bit, it's a little bit vulnerable at that position in the neck. So that's what we're going for. And because the target is a little bit lower, it's a little bit more difficult for my opponent to notice what's going on. So this is where I'll land the technique. So I paused it here a little bit on impact to show you from standstill, do the technique fast, and then I pulled it a little bit and pause it so you can see where it lands. And I'm going to do it again. So there's no betraying of your intent. You just let it go right away and then bring it straight back. So once again, no movement, and then let it whip out. And you see that, again, my head doesn't move, my shoulder doesn't move, my elbow moves, and then my forearm moves, and then my wrist moves. And at the end of that chain of movement, my fingers come swinging around and they crack the whip. So that's the two-finger whipping technique that you do. And obviously, I like to follow up with something. I paused here. You see me in this fully bent arm position here at the elbow. Obviously, I wouldn't stop there. So as soon as you launch this one here, okay, I should from this position here be extending my arm and blasting through him with a palm heel strike. So that is a very easy follow-up that you can do. You can do a bunch of other follow-ups, obviously, but give this one a try. See if you like it. Again, be very careful with partners. Don't injure anybody. Do what I did, stand a little bit out of distance, and you can hit the pads, or you can hit a heavy back or whatever target you have. Hit that one safely with as much power as you can, but be careful with your partner. That's it for this one. Leave all your questions and comments on my Patreon post, and I will get right away, get cracking on the next technique. Thank you, and I'll see you guys soon.